Dear friends, hope you all are well and keeping safe. My name is Shantanu Barua, and this is the fourth video in this series all about habit. Listen, I greatly appreciate all the feedbacks, comments, and suggestions you guys are giving me. Truly appreciate it. Please keep them coming. In this particular video, I'm going to talk about a very important aspect of habit known as keystone habit. So far, we have learned that habit, as you recall, has three parts. Habits as cue. Based on that cue, there's a routine we perform for that habit, and there's a clear reward we look for. We also learned that habits are stored in our brain in the basal ganglia, which are automatic triggers. So the brain doesn't work. It basically automatically pulls out a habit, and that's the reason it's so important to understand how habits are formed and why certain habits are so hard to get rid of. Uh, the keystone habit that we're going to learn today is a very important aspect because it has a domino effect. So what it basically means is, if you can get one habit right, lot of other habits it can fall in place right for you. For instance, you want to change your lifestyle. Let's say you're a couch potato, you want to lose weight, you want to be more active, you want to eat healthy. But what happens is you're trying different things, but it never works for you. Let's say, for example, you're trying to avoid your cookie. 3 days it works, fourth day you're again going back to the cookie jar. Or let's say you want to be active, you come back after work, few days you go for a run. Here is a seventh day, you lapse again, and once you lapse, you're again going back to your old habit. So what you basically have to understand is in a keystone habit, if you can get one thing right, other things fall in place. For example, if you if you put a good reward for yourself, as an example, let's say you want to run a 5K in the fall, and for that, that's a clear goal that you have set, and you have to work towards it. So what you do is every morning or every evening, you get up from a couch and you try to run because you have a goal. You have days which are going by, participate in a 5K, you're trying to get the stamina in. As you're trying to go more out, what you see is that because of that, when you come back, you feel more rejuvenated. So you're picking more healthy eating habits and you're eating healthy. So what happens? Your body feels good. Your body feels good. You do other good things like, for example, not sitting in front of the TV, you're more active, you're exercising, you're setting goals, you're trying to go for a particular thing, which is you want to run 5K. So what you have seen is that by setting a right goal and then doing one thing, which is in this case trying to run, what you've basically done is that you have formulated a keystone habit and other things falls in place, like not watching TV too much, becoming more active, eating healthy, and so on and so forth. So how the keystone habits are formed, this we will try to understand from an example. Again, this is an example I'm taking from the book Power of Habit. It's written by Charles Duhigg. And in this particular book, he takes an example of a company within Alcoa. Before I start, I want to let you know that keystone habit through this example will also learn that how organizations can change. Imagine this is not about changing an individual, the behavior of an entire organization. So let's begin on this particular episode. Alcoa in 1980s was a huge company. It was an aluminum manufacturing company, still there, and one of the largest aluminum producer. It used to make everything that you can think of, right from the wrapper of Hershey's to a screw in a satellite. Back in the 1980s, because of its expansion, there are a lot of things that was happening, which was making Alcoa's shareholders very nervous. They're losing market share to their competition. The quality of the quality of their manufacturing was going down by the day. There are many issues, including employees. There were disgruntled employees. There were strikes going on. There are many issues which was kind of plaguing the company Alcoa, and the shareholders were trying to see what they can do. So what they did was, one of the shareholder has an experience with a person who worked for international papers, and this gentleman, his name is Paul O'Neill. He was a government employee, and they brought him in to see if he can change Alcoa. This is back in 1987, and this is his first meeting with the broader shareholders in a ballroom in Manhattan. So he comes to the stage and he starts speaking about what he wants to do with Alcoa. So if you already know, a new CEO who comes in, typically how it starts is he will make a bad joke on himself, will make everyone feel at ease, and then typically he'll go down in terms of what he's going to do about the company or what things he'll change. At the end of the day, the fiduciary duty of any CEO is to give returns to the shareholders. So he'll talk about how he'll increase the revenue, increase profitability, and decrease all of the issues that they have, and make Alcoa again a better and bigger company. So that is what is expected out of an incoming CEO. But regardless of all this point, this gentleman comes in and makes a very different point altogether. He said, "Gentlemen, great to have you all here, and I have only one goal in Alcoa, and the goal is very simple. I want safety to be my first priority." And he stopped there. Everyone was looking at him, trying to understand what he's trying to say. But he said, "Yeah, all I want to do is employee safety. I want to make sure there are less accident." And he gave a rattle of, there's at least one accident per week in every factory that we have. We want to reduce it. We want to make sure our employees are safe. And that is my first priority and the only priority I have. People were confused. Some of the shareholders, in fact, raised their hands and asked questions like, what about the piling up inventories in the aerospace area? Or what is the capital ratio? What do you have to comment on that? He said, "No, I don't have any comments. My only focus right now is increasing employee safety." So the meeting ended, and a lot of the shareholders, as they walked out of the room, they actually called all of their well-wishers and people who have invested in Alcoa and were saying that, in the first bell of next day, make sure you sell all the stocks of Alcoa. We've got a nut CEO, and he is focusing on a very different aspect, known as safety, instead of focusing on the perennial issues we're having in the company, like quality issues, employee strike issue, things like profitability going down, market share going down, and things like that. So many shareholders, they all thought that a company is going to doom, and they wanted to sell their shares, and they advised their clients and partners as well. Well, guess what? They were all wrong. The company's revenue doubled in the first year itself. And just to give you a perspective, if you have invested $1 million in 1987, and if you stayed along with Paul O'Neill during his tenure for 23 odd years, he retired in 2000, your revenue would, or your investment would have gone 5 times size. $1 million would have become 5 million, and on top of it, you would have earned another 1 million through dividend. So what has it done? And why safety was important? Why were all the shareholders wrong? So let's try to understand that. When he took over Alcoa, the biggest problem that was plaguing the company is safety. A lot of people were, dying. Aluminum manufacturing is a very complicated process. You are doing melting in 1500 degree Celsius, which is, if you can imagine, anyone can melt at any point in time. Their machineries, heavy machineries used. There were accidents happening all over the place. What Paul O'Neill was focusing on is he wants to make sure that it's a safer place to people to work on. Also to understand, the prior CEO tried to put a lot of safety procedures in place, not that he didn't try, and he was putting quality as the topmost agenda. The moment that happened, all of the employees retaliated. In fact, 15,000 of the employees came to the street striking and trying to upset the whole thing. So in this case, what Paul did was he simply said that I don't care about anything. He told all his managers, his deputies, by saying that, look, all that matters is safety. In fact, right after he became CEO, he made a tour, he went to every factory, and he just made a statement saying that I can compromise on anything. I'm going to listen about anything that you say, but one thing I'll not compromise on is employee safety. Now, who can argue on that point? Neither the managers who are on the floor, nor the people who are working in a factory. I mean, who can say that, no, don't focus on safety? Everyone was kind of falling in line by saying that, yeah, safety is important, and they kind of were trying to follow the path of what Paul was trying to put together. Then he went ahead and he told all of his divisional vice president and unit vice president by saying that any incident that occurs, you need to report to me personally in 24 hours with 3 aspects. You have to first tell me what happened. Second, you have to tell me that why it happened. And third, you have to tell me that what you're going to do that it will never happen again. Now, this is a big deal. I mean, think about this. A unit president has many factories. Typically, in 24 hours, if he has to personally report to Paul, he has to have complete control about what is going on the floor. So what he did, he in turn told the same thing to his line managers, to the factory vice president, by saying that you need to tell me if anything happens right in the next hour. And what happens, a cultural change was happening. And similarly, the line manager told the people on the floor by saying that anything that happens, you need to tell me right away. You have to tell me why it happened, what we could have done to avoid it. You need to give me everything. So there was a chain reaction that was happening. People at the ground floor were given less time to report back. Any incident happened immediately, land manager knows. Doesn't matter day of the what time of the day or what time of the night, they would know. They immediately report back to their factory manager reporting to the line vice president, then to the unit vice president, coming to Paul in 24 hours. And there was no compromise on that. Because of this, what happened was, see, anything that happens from a overall standpoint, any kind of accident or any kind of incident, they're repetitive in nature. Sometimes the machineries are not working. Sometimes people know that people do not follow safety issues. So what happened was there was a cultural change happening. People were trying to be more cautious. Line manager were more cautious. They in fact had a book of ideas that if particular thing happened, because they have to give an idea as well, but why it will not happen again, they were writing those ideas and passing it back. In fact, people were taking decisions which they never took. For example, if they found that a particular line has certain issue in the manufacturing line, they will immediately stop, and that was okay. Paul was completely okay with that. What was not okay is that accident happening, repeating that incident again if that has happened before, and having an answer. So there was a cultural change. People were talking, people were behaving a different manner. And what he did was, if you see from an overall standpoint, he did a cultural change in the company from a different perspective altogether. So what happened here? Three things to note. One, the chain of command has gone down from top to the bottom level. People at manager level were taking action in terms of stopping a line or taking decisions or giving ideas. Second, there was a sense of ownership and responsibility at the highest level. People owned what was happening, and since things were not to be repeated, they have to find ideas not to do it. And because of that, the employees were trying to be all aligned. Who doesn't want safety? Everyone wants to be safe in a working place. The incident, as usual, were coming down dramatically because they were implementing ideas. Old machineries were replaced with new one, and automatically what happened was, because of that culture, the quality came up. They were trying to follow the right procedures. They were adaptive to changes. For example, the prior CEO tried to bring in a process expert to see what was going on, and they were thrown away. Now, at this point in time, when this CEO brought in a new process expert to see how manufacturing can be done better, they were welcoming it because they all wanted idea to make sure they can be humming. And everyone loved Paul O'Neill because he was working for the employees. So he did one keystone behavior change: safety. And because of safety, the quality increased, the machinery quality also increased, their throughput increased, the employees were more happier, they felt more responsible because they're taking ownership of what they can do. Like a line manager, as I told you, can shut down a complete line without even being questioned if he finds the safety is not there. And then he took action. If people were not following safety regulation, they were fired, including an incident I recall from the book that a very senior person was fired just because he did not report the incident in 24 hours and he tried to go around it. So, and because of that, Alcoa as a company changed. And if you study that whole case study from an overall standpoint, the company changes because of one keystone habit, and they were more happier, more engaged, more output driven. In fact, so much so that because of that idea book, people found that they have a voice. In fact, I remember one of the other chapter from the book where here is this guy who's like a person right at the belt level, and he has an idea of how mixing their different pigmentation for, they used to create aluminum, what you call walls for houses. And that the color scheme changes, people taste changes by country, by zone, by region, by season. And they have this color pigmentation machine which is segregated and separated. He had this idea that if you can bring them all together, technically you can change color on the fly, and you can cut down the production time almost by days, as they're trying to change different color scheme. Now he had a channel. Now, before, he didn't know where to go with his idea. There was no channel available. So the idea he could log, in fact, he could directly give it to his manager. His manager can talk to the vice president, then to the Paul, and it was implemented. And a new line of services are created, which were like killing competition. Another thing to note, back in 1987, there were no popular email system. In fact, believe it or not, the first email communication system in the primitive stage was created by Paul O'Neill's company Alcoa. Reason being is, you need to communicate things in 24 hours. You know, a factory down in Cincinnati, and Paul O'Neill sitting in Pittsburgh, you need to make information flow at a rapid pace with multiple people handling it. So they create their own internal communication system using the computers they had in place. And that was a primitive mail he created, and a revolution has started. That's about Paul O'Neill, and you've seen that how one keystone habit has kind of rapidly changed the company. And I've given you the result how Alcoa has done so very well in its span of time, and still happens to be one of the best Fortune 500 company. So what we have learned from this is keystone habits are important, but what is so very important is that understanding the underlying principle of keystone habits. So what one habit can trigger the other habits to fall in place? How do you reward yourself in this? In this case, safety was a reward. He didn't increase the pay scale of employees, neither he gave in to their demand. All he did was he he made them feel belonging to the whole ecosystem. He got their ideas onto the table. He started with safety, but everything fell in place automatically. There are other examples that Paul O'Neill has done when he was in government. He was running the healthcare program, and one of the things he did over there, to tell you very shortly, is about the mortality rate of pregnant women. It was highest for the US, and again he brought it down, is now aligned to one of the best in the world. And again over there, the problem was teenage girls were getting pregnant, and people may think that okay, you have to give sex education, or you have to increase the nutrition so that the death rate decreases. But he did something else altogether. He ensured that the high school teachers, where the teenagers usually go, they are trained well on biology, who can make them understand the entire process of pregnancy and what they should do. And he found that in the rural areas there were not many biology teachers, and what he did was invested in that. Again, identifying the right trigger, and that can have a domino effect of how behaviors can change. So coming back to you, if you are a leader in an organization, you want to change your organization behavior, you have to find areas that you need to influence on, which can have a rapid effect throughout the company. Or if you want to change individually yourself as well, there are many things you want to change. You have to find that one keystone habit with the right reward mechanics, so that if you can change it, everything falls in place. Again, I thank you for your time. Hope this was helpful. I would love to hear from you what your views and thoughts are. If you have examples of your own company or your own self, or the areas where you observed how keystone habits have changed organization, people, or society at large, I would love to hear from you. So leave behind your thoughts, give a subscribe to my channel, and I look forward to hearing from you. Take care now. Bye.